don't typically see a dog in the Orthodox community, but there is nothing typical about the story of Moshe Kopman and his guide dog, Rocky. Born with cone dystrophy, a congenital condition that affects the ability to see color but also includes progressive deterioration of the retina, Moshe was taught by his Holocaust-surviving parents to not let a little thing like blindness stand in his way. He was told that he comes from a family of heroes, and he was expected to overcome obstacles. Born in America in 1955, his parents discovered that he was visually impaired at the age of 2, when he would stand very close to the TV so he could see what was on. At 4.5, he asked his mother, why didn't he have grandparents like the other kids? And she told him the family story. His mother and father were actually born in Poland, and actually married while living in the Warsaw Ghetto. He had a brother who was born there, but later died from malnutrition. His mother's cousin's husband, Henrik Friedman, was rounded up by the Germans and was told he was being taken to a work camp, and he and the others would soon return. Upon arrival at the camp, Treblinka, he smelled a horrible odor and was told it was the burning flesh of the people who had been eliminated. His job involved sorting clothes taken from the prisoners that he then placed back on the train returning to Warsaw. Realizing that he would not survive for long, he hid under the huge pile of clothes, and although the Germans sent dogs to find him, his escape was successful. Jumping from the train before it reached its destination, he ran to Warsaw to warn the people that they were not going to work camps, but rather traveling to their deaths. Henrik Friedman was the one that sounded the alarm that caused the Warsaw Uprising. Both his mother and father fought in the uprising and, when all was lost, hid in an attic for quite a while before being discovered. His mother was one of the women who made a bomb that famously blew up crematorium number 4. 4 of the women were hung, but she and a few others were not discovered to be part of the plot. After they were liberated, his father discovered that his mother was in a hospital in the south of France, and after their reunion, they made their way to America and settled in Connecticut. His father worked as a baker, and after a while, they adopted a little boy to give him a chance to survive as a tribute to the child they had lost. Moshe was that child, and he was told from a young age that he was a gift. They later had another daughter, Rivka, who still lives in Connecticut. In 1967, when he was 11, he remembers sitting with his mother glued to the news reports about the Six-Day War, and the enormous sense of pride he felt when the Jews won in spite of insurmountable odds. Moshe remembers clearly announcing to his mother, "One day I plan to live with my people in the land of Israel." Moshe knew only a small amount of his parents' Holocaust story until he was 14. He and his mother attended a presentation by Elie Wiesel, and Elie told the story of the courageous women who fought back. After the speech, Moshe's mother suffered a terrible attack of PTSD as the repressed memory came flooding to the surface. He remembers her sitting in the car, unable to compose herself enough to be able to drive home. Following the revelation about his family history, Moshe became more interested in his heritage and started to become more religious. He later attended the University of Rochester, where he met Gila, the girl of his dreams. Moshe went to his rabbi and said that he wanted to marry, but the rabbi told him this was impossible. Knowing that he was adopted, the rabbi said that it was wrong to marry a Jewish woman unless he could find out if he was, in fact, Jewish himself. While he had never sought information about his birth parents, this was a reason to try. He contacted the authorities in Connecticut, where a law had just been passed allowing adopted children to find out about their genetic backgrounds, but without revealing the full identity of the parents. Moshe learned that his birth parents were of Anglo-Saxon ancestry and that he was not born Jewish. In addition to this information, Moshe's adoptive mother told him that his birth mother was named Barbara. Moshe converted to Judaism and married Gila. They lived in Connecticut for 6 years and made Aliyah to Israel with 3 children in tow. Today they have 9 children and 31 grandchildren. 2 of their children live in Israel, 1 in Belarus, 1 in Florida, and the rest live in Buffalo, New York. One of his daughters inherited cone dystrophy, as have 2 of her children. Another son was recently diagnosed with lymphoma at the age of 35, and we pray, along with his 5 children, for his full recovery. Throughout the years, Moshe had many diverse and interesting jobs. He was a repairman, computer programmer, baker, and a driver. Yes, he drove for a while, although he admits he probably shouldn't have. He memorized the eye chart and got a license. Of course, he could not see the color of the lights, and his car suffered a few dings, but he was never in a major accident. Why drive? This goes back to his mother's lesson that he must never look down and feel sorry for himself. He came from a long line of heroes, and he needed to do for himself and not simply get by. As his eyesight deteriorated, he continued to compensate, relying on his children to lead him. He also created his own large print siddur so he could pray. One day, about 3 years ago, he finally admitted he was unable to get around on his own and sought the help of a mobility instructor to learn to walk with a long cane. It was at this time that members of his close-knit community, where he has lived for over 30 years, finally understood why Moshe didn't wave to them as they passed in the street. He was not ignoring them. He simply couldn't see them. The cane lowered barriers to mobility, but taught Moshe several important lessons. The first lesson was to not be afraid to ask for help. He said, when you ask for help, you actually take control of the situation. He also learned that by asking for help, people turned from being obstacles to angels. Another lesson was that people with disabilities should live in a religious neighborhood, where the feeling of camaraderie is much stronger than in most communities. Moshe told the story about how someone saw him walking with his cane, but he walked into a tree branch that was hanging low. Afterwards, he could hear the snapping of branches up ahead, and he realized that someone, to this day he does not know who, was walking ahead of him, clearing the path. In the Orthodox community, the desire to do a mitzvah, a good deed, is ever present. So people go out of their way to make life easier for one another. After finally admitting to himself that he was legally blind, he joined activities at a local school for the blind. He made 2 very good friends, one a professional man of great accomplishments, but who only gets by with the help of a human guide. The other had received a guide dog from the Israel Guide Dog Center and explained to Moshe about the freedom and independence that was possible with a well-trained dog. Moshe discussed the possibility with his wife, who was very opposed to the idea. In fact, her exact quote was, "There is no way we're going to have a dog in this house." Dogs are not generally welcome in the Orthodox community, and Gila was a little afraid of having an animal in the house, but she also worried that a dog would distance me from other people. Moshe moved forward and applied for a guide dog. He was on the waiting list for about a year when he received a call from Yariv, one of the trainers, who asked if he would be willing to come to the center for a test walk. For Moshe, it was love at first sight. Rocky was exactly the right dog for him. He is extremely well behaved and walks slowly, which is just the way Moshe likes it. When Moshe arrived for the 3-week course at the center, he was one of 6 students. As they went around the circle introducing themselves, Shraga said that he lost his vision in a work accident, lived in Ashdod, and added, "And I hate religious people." When it was Moshe's turn, he told everybody about his family and then added that he was a Chabadnik and lived in a Haredi neighborhood. By the end of the course, Moshe and Shraga were fast friends, and Shraga makes it a point to call Moshe every Friday to wish his friend Shabbat Shalom. As for his community, nobody comes rushing to the dog to pet him. Most are a little wary of Rocky and keep their distance, but he has not had any open hostility. Some children will slowly approach and ask about the dog, and a few are even brave enough to pet him, but again, most keep a respectful distance. Gila's fear that the dog would isolate Moshe has not been realized. In fact, Moshe said the opposite is true. When asked if Rocky is welcome at the synagogue, Moshe recalls the Rebbe understands that Rocky is essential, but asked me to stand in the back, to which Moshe readily agreed, since he stood in the back anyway. Light bothers him, so standing in the back where it is a little darker works out for the best. Although Moshe would love to teach Rocky to daven, he is content to have his best friend by his side while he does the heavy lifting. As I was leaving his apartment, I noticed the long cane hanging by the door. I asked Moshe if he still uses it, and he said, "Occasionally," but then he added, "I really don't like the cane so much because sometimes when I fold it, my fingers get pinched between the sections. So the difference between my cane and my canine is the cane bites, but the canine does not." Now a little more has been added to Moshe's story, but has nothing to do with Rocky. Moshe decided to take another stab at trying to locate his birth mother. Using Facebook and other online tools, he quickly ran into a dead end. Unbeknownst to him, this past February, his son had taken a test through Ancestry.com, and the results had uncovered a near-perfect match with a man living in Seattle. The results said that the person was most likely his uncle. When his son obtained the profile, he immediately wondered why his father's picture was on the report. Then he dug a little deeper and found the man had a congenital eye disorder, as did his mother, Barbara. There was no question in Moshe's mind that he had found a brother he did not know existed. He later found out he had 2 sisters, but only one is still living. Following several long calls with his long-lost brother, he asked about his mother. It turns out that Barbara flatly denied having another child. She said she raised 3 great kids, and that was it. Moshe was heartbroken, but knew he was on the right path. This past October, he flew to Seattle to meet the family. He walked in with Rocky and said, "I brought a surprise guest." His sister also made an announcement that she had brought a surprise guest. And this is how Moshe met his 84-year-old birth mother for the first time. Barbara finally admitted giving him up when she was a teenager. She took the bus alone to the hospital, but never saw the baby, and did not even know its gender. It turns out that his father and mother stayed together and had 3 more children, so his siblings were not half-brothers and sisters. They were fully related by blood. While his siblings were raised in a much different way than he was, everyone gets along amazingly well, and this is the beginning of a wonderful new chapter of the story. In fact, one of his new cousins is an evangelical, so she can't wait to meet her relatives next year in Jerusalem. It is Moshe's strong conviction that his story is not really a story about Moshe, but rather a story about the kindness of the Creator.